Today I'm going to show you how to start an alpha pattern wall hanging. Sorry, I just have to pop in because I forgot to add this when I was filming the beginning. But in this video, I'm not showing you how to read alpha patterns. You should already know how to read alpha patterns before watching this video. If you don't, please go learn and then come back. I hope to one day make a video on how to read them. It's really quite simple. But in this video, I am just showing you how to start a wall hanging. I have a video how to start a keychain. There's really not much of a difference between a wall hanging and a keychain. It's just what you're putting it on. Instead of a dowel, you're using a D-ring keychain. So for this one, instead of using a D-ring keychain, you're using a dowel. But yeah, I would assume that you already know how to do alpha patterns and that you've perhaps even made one before, whether that's a bracelet or a keychain. So I'm not showing you how to read alpha patterns, just how to transfer that pattern to a wall hanging. Alpha patterns are pretty easy to make once you get the hang of them. So they can seem a little intimidating at first, but they're so fun to make and there's so many different patterns that you can do. So to get started, you need your supplies. You're going to need your base strings. You can use whatever color base string you want, but I'm going to use white for this tutorial. And I just get like the packs of white at the craft store that are kind of cheap because you don't really need them to be high quality. They're just going to be base strings. Then you're going to need a wooden dowel. This is what you attach your wall hanging to. There's all kinds of sizes for dowels, but this skinny one is the one that works just fine. I used to use thicker ones, but it's harder to cut the ends off. These skinny ones, you can cut the ends off with scissors if you put enough pressure on them. And you honestly don't need anything stronger because the strings aren't going to weigh down your dowel that much. I can't remember where I got these, probably on Amazon. Just look for skinny wooden dowels. You could also maybe use those wooden skewer sticks, just cut the pointy ends off, but I think these are fine. Then you're going to need scissors and tape and a pattern. This is the pattern I'm going to be using for this tutorial. It's number 59452 on Bracelet book. I've made this one before, and if you have a pattern that you've made, whether it's a keychain or a bracelet, an alpha pattern, you can actually use it as a reference for how long you need to cut your base strings. So since I've already made this pattern, I'm going to use it as a reference for how long to cut my base strings. I am notoriously bad at not measuring things, so I can just eyeball it. So first and most important step of starting your wall hanging is counting how many base strings you need. So I like to print the pattern out. You can also just do this on the computer, but for me it's easier to actually have the physical pattern because it's easy for me to count the squares and track it, like track how many I've counted. So this pattern has an uneven amount of strings, and that's actually perfect for this tutorial because I'm going to show you what to do if you have an uneven amount of base strings for your alpha pattern. And this can apply to bracelets, keychains, or wall hangings, whatever you're using for an alpha pattern. So first things first, we have to count how many base strings we need. So if you have an even amount, I like to go 2 at a time. Even if you have an odd amount, you can do 2 at a time. So this one actually has 35. I pre-counted, but I'm going to count again just to show you how I do it. You can also use a pen to mark your progress just to make sure. I recommend counting your base strings at least 3 times before you start knotting, because if you end up with the wrong amount of base strings, the whole pattern is going to be thrown off, and especially if you are like already down into here, you're going to lose all your progress. So I'm going to count these. I like to go 2 at a time. It's just easier for me. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 35. So 35 base strings are needed for this pattern. I'm going to take my white and I'm going to count as I cut them out just to be extra sure I have enough. So you're going to pull out your thread and you're actually going to double it over. And since I've made this pattern before, I can put it up to here just to see how long I actually need it. And you want to make sure to save room for the ends, however you make your ends. And I always like to cut more than I need. So I'm just going to go like cut like this length here. So I have room for the end and room just in case something happens and I need more. So since I have an uneven amount of base strings, I'm actually only going to cut out the even amount. So 34, and if you're folding them in half, that means you divide it by 2. So that would be 17. I need 17 base strings, and for the 18th one, I will show you what to do when I've cut out all of my strings. Something else you can do if you don't want to use a new skein of thread is you can actually use scrap thread. I have a lot of white scrap thread, but for this tutorial, I just wanted to show you the skeins. but I use my scrap thread all the time for base strings. It's the perfect way to repurpose them, especially if you want to do like a multicolored background. Then using your scrap thread is perfect because you can use a bunch of different colors. Okay, now I have all of my base strings and I'm going to recount them again just to be sure. So I have 34 base strings. Now for the 35th one, I will get to that. I keep saying I'll get to that. I will get to that. So now I'm going to grab my wooden dowel, which is what I'm going to be putting my strings on. I'm going to move this to the side for now. This is what I'm going to be putting my strings on, and I like to recount again as I'm putting my strings on just to make extra sure. So now you have your strings. Grab your first string and you're going to fold it in half and pinch the top part here so it makes a little loop. I believe this is called a lark's head knot. So what you're going to do is put it behind the dowel and then pull the loop over, if you can see, and then pull your strings through the loop. And there you've made your first knot for your base strings for your wall hanging. And you're just going to put the rest of them on just like that. So grab your string, fold it in half. I've already folded them. Whenever I cut them out, I fold them in half, so they're already folded in half. It just makes it easier. But fold it in half, pinch it to make the loop, put it next to the one you just did. You don't have to pull the loop over. I was just doing that for the tutorial purposes. You can just have it like this and pull the end up and through. So pull the tail through and then pull it tight. And you're just going to do that for all of your base strings. Now all of my base strings are on the dowel, except for one, which I will show you how to do in a minute. So now you're going to actually turn it over so you can see all of the knots. It just makes it easier to make your knots if there's already existing knots here. And it looks better because it just blends seamlessly. Also, it does not matter if it's uneven on the dowel. I'm going to end up cutting off the ends anyway, so it is more like this. When you have an uneven amount of base strings, you can actually do alternating colors if you prefer, but one of your base strings, at least the way that I do it and the way I'm going to show you, will end up as your background string. So in this case, my background string is going to be white. So it just makes sense that all of my base strings will be white. So there's really you can't tell like a difference. But if you want to do different colors, so like this one, if you're going to do these colors, you could do alternating between white and pink, and then have your last base string, your odd one out, be white, which I've done before. I've done alternating base strings before and it does turn out pretty cool, but it does require some thinking because you have to make sure that the order matches where you're going to put your leading string. Your leading string is the one that is going to be making the background knots, so it's going to be the white background here. So for this purpose, I just did all white because it's just easier to show you and you don't have to think too far ahead on the order of the colors. So what I'm going to do, I put my thread on this bobbin. You don't have to do that. You can keep your thread in the skein if that's easier for you. But for me, it's easier for me to put it on a bobbin because I'm going to be knotting with it. So I'm going to roll out this much because this is like the length of my other base strings. I did make them longer than they probably should be, but that's okay. You'd always want your strings to be longer than they need to instead of running out and making them shorter. So I'm going to fold it in half. It's still on the bobbin. I'm not going to cut it off. I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm actually going to turn this over again. You can put it on either end. I like to start from this end, so I'm going to put it on this side over here. So you're going to flip it over again, and you're just going to do a knot like you did for the other ones, except this time your bobbin is going to go through the loop. So you can make it pretty big, and then just pull it through. You might need to collect your bobbin here. The loop can get a little convoluted sometimes, but just pull it through. Make sure your tail is in there. Line it up with others, and there. Now you have your odd string on the dowel. So when you flip it back over, you have the correct number of base strings. Let's just count one more time. So I'm going to exclude this one. I'm going to exclude the one with the bobbin on it. So perfect, it's on the end. I'm just not going to count, or no, it's not, it's this one. I'll show you how to start actually start the wall hanging. If it ends up like this, your bobbin is on the inside instead of outside. But I'm not going to count this one because this is my leading string. So 1, 3, 5. You can also just count the loops up here, it's a little easier to do that. 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19, 21, 23, 25, 27, 29, 31, 33, 35. So I have the correct number of bass strings. And I'm just going to tighten these up again. So now we can actually get started on making the knots. I'm going to get some tape. I like to use this craft tape. It's very sturdy. And I tape down the ends like right up to where the strings end because you don't want them to get too loose. Like once you start knotting, they won't get loose because there won't be anything for them to fall onto. But just make sure they're all very tight before you start knotting. And you're going to tape down both sides. So if your bobbin happens to be on the inside, see here how this is the shorter string and it's the outside string and the one attached to the bobbin is on the inside. If that happens, you can either just switch it like this, or what I do is I just get my string and I make a backward forward knot. And there you go. And so then you're just gonna follow the pattern. So this pattern is a whole row of forward knots. So there you go. That is how to start a alpha pattern wall hanging. It's not so bad. I would show you how to end it, like attach this little string, but I'm gonna be honest, I'm very bad at it because I have to always do this. So yeah, I usually just cut a piece of string and then tie it to both ends, and whatever's left I tie them together in the back. And then to actually make these, I separate the strings when I'm done into sections, and then I just tie them together in a knot. I used to do it a different way, but I like this way more. It takes less time and I think it looks fine. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I have new tutorials hopefully every Sunday. I'm trying to get back into my bracelet making and my bracelet channel. So thank you so much for watching, and good luck with your alpha wall hangings.